Look, we have heard a lot from a lot of different political party leaders about the regular stuff, right? Everyone talks about the economy. Immigration has been a big issue. Transportation gets talked about, but the conversation, unless it happens to be about the Quebec City tunnel idea, doesn't really get a whole lot of traction beyond the day that it gets talked about for the first time. So whether it's a new metro line, as I believe Quebec Solid Air is suggesting, right, what they call their purple line, whether it's about free transit for seniors or students on buses in Montreal or maybe all through Quebec, there's a lot of talk, but not really any discussion, at least there hasn't been up to now, beyond the Quebec City idea, of what's feasible and what's not, like what could actually work. So we thought we'd try to find out. Pierre Barrieau is a transportation planning expert at the University of Montreal, and he's on the line right now. Monsieur Barrieau, thanks for being with us this afternoon. I appreciate it. And let me begin by asking you, from what you have heard, can you look at one platform or another and say, yes, I think that's the one that makes the most sense?
No, for the simple reason that they all have small tidbits, but none of them have a complete, comprehensive platform that is easily implementable. So they all have major issues with them.
Okay, well, that's good to know. They all have major issues with them. Let's start with the one that you think is, I would say, the wackiest, or at least the least feasible. I'm going to guess that's an extension of the Metro line, or would I be wrong?
Well, let's start with Quebec Solidaire, since you're bringing us down that road. Their platform is the most complete. They want to bring the West Orange line to Laval. They want to extend the Green line in the east. They want to build a new Purple line, which is just basically Madame Plante's old pink line with just a few fixings on it. And then they want to bring mass transit at a much lower cost, and they also want to build a equivalent of Via Rail for the province of Quebec with over 1,000 kilometers of new intercity trains. And they also want to replace Orléans Express and the other operators of intercity buses across the province. And all of this would be done, according to them, with $47 billion.
And that is reasonable? Or I mean, that's a lot of $1 billion. Is that possible?
I'd say probably if if we do an in-depth analysis of it, you're probably looking at between $80 and $120 billion to implement it.
Wow.
So between 2 to 3 times the cost. And you're looking at probably $3 to $4 billion extra deficit a year in operating all of that infrastructure. So it's a huge sticker price, and it's a very large deficit year after year. But it doesn't mean as a society, if we do decide to spend that amount of money, a lot of this stuff makes sense. But right now, transportation, people are complaining about it, but it seems to be going under the radar, especially when we compare it to the other parties.
Okay, well, let's take another party. The PQ, part of its transportation plan, features $1 per day unlimited public transit as a plan. What do you think of that?
Well, the issue with anything that is free or almost free is that it's not bringing in any revenue. And the problem with that $365 annual public transit pass is riders are already paying over $1 billion per year for their transit passes across the province of Quebec. So what that's doing is basically removing $1 billion, over $1 billion in annual revenue for the transit systems, and that will have to be paid in another way. And study after study, for decades now, we know the best way to bring people to mass transit is not to lower prices, it's to greatly improve the quality of service. So the Parti Québécois, it sounds like a good idea of lowering the rates, but actually that money would be much better spent in improving the service and keeping the cost as is.
But, as I hear you say that, I think to myself, and I realize this is pandemic related to some degree, but this idea of improving service, the STM, for example, would say, well, look, ridership is down, so we don't have the money to be able to improve service because we need money to either add more buses or more garages or build more electric or buy more electric buses. You're kind of, damned if you do and damned if you don't, in a sense.
Well, we're looking here, of course, the metro has a relatively good frequency, all of these things, but we're talking, for example, bus lines that are only every half hour, every hour, of commuter trains that don't operate on the weekends, that only have one train between the morning and the evening rush hour. These are the types of things, if you want people to abandon their car in the suburbs, for example, and use transit, we have to really do those improvements. And those improvements, we can't do it if we remove that $1 billion funding coming from the users.
Which would seem, if we take that money out and we have to use money to improve the system, that the only place I imagine that would come from was we'd have to improve or increase taxes. Rather, nobody wants that either.
Exactly. The money has to come from somewhere.
All right. So from what you have heard, maybe you should try this the other way around. Who has the most feasible idea? And if we're going to talk Quebec City, and I know this has been the big issue between François Legault and Éric Duhem, for example, the fact that, the premier said there was no study. Turns out there was a study and it wasn't released, or there had been no study recently. Does that idea make any sense? I think the last time I heard that project's supposed to weigh in at about $6 or $7 billion.
Yeah, and with the way things are going with inflation and construction and everything right now, the project is shrinking, but the budget is probably going to expand even more. And the Liberal Party and a few other parties had the smart idea of wanting to bring the streetcar LRT line to the South Shore as a condition to the third link being built. The Conservative Party, on their side, they actually want to cancel the streetcar project in Quebec City and just build the new bridge, but they don't want it where the CAQ is saying they want it on l'île d'Orléans, which is problematic in terms of land use. And the CAQ, they just want to build the corridor, the 4-lane tunnel that they've been pushing for a while.
So let me ask you then, with respect. So you're in urban planning, right? You've heard all these different ideas, and they sound good in theory, perhaps, but in execution they would cost $1 gazillion. If you had to say, or if you had to come up with a plan as to what the province really needs in the way of transportation, you mentioned about increased efficiency. Would that be the be-all and end-all?
I mean, part of the thing is, yes, we have to improve some frequencies. We have to improve the environmental impact, but we also do have to build high-quality transit if you want to get people out of their cars, whether it be like the CAQ, which is still saying they want to build Le REM de l'Est, just not the downtown portion, whether it be Québec solidaire with their subway expansion and their streetcar lines, or these types of projects are also necessary, but maybe just at a speed that we can afford based on what people are willing to pay. So a mix between Québec solidaire and some of the other parties is probably the way forward. Québec solidaire, at least they've presented a vision of what they want long term. So this is good, but we need to get these projects off the ground. And we have to start. Yes, we have to bring people back into transit and out of cars, because post-COVID now, congestion is basically at over 95% of what it was prior to COVID. So as people keep coming back to work, congestion is soon going to be worse than what it was before. And it's not with 5 trains per day on certain train lines that we'll be able to convince people to abandon their car once again and come back to transit.
So let me ask you a final question. We've been talking a lot, at least in the past, about the REM, which I understand the first portion of which could open by as early as, this fall or before the end of the year. How much of an impact do you think that will have? Talking about congestion and people coming back to work, is the REM the answer? Do you think that will make a big difference or any difference at all?
For people on the South Shore, most definitely. People who are on the center-western portion, we're thinking Saint-Lambert, Brassard, La Prairie, those types of cities, we're going to see truly a great jump of people coming back to downtown. The project right now, I think they were aiming for December being operational before it was for September, but with the accident that happened a week or two ago, part of the work is blocked right now, so it's probably going to be, hopefully it would be a beautiful something we could open on Boxing Day or something like that, hopefully, early January at the latest. But I hope and I truly believe that it's an example of, or a demonstration of, investment in infrastructure as a incentive for people to use it. And I believe they're going to have issues with their park and rides are going to be full, and I believe it's going to be a great success.
Okay. Mr. Barrieau, I thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated today.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. I think he's out in Italy, isn't he?